I make voiceovers constantly, so the question of local versus paid text-to-speech is not academic for me. It is a bill I pay or do not pay every month, and the quality decision that shows up in every video. Text-to-speech, turning written words into a spoken voice, has gotten genuinely good, both in the cloud and on your own machine. But they are not equal, and the honest answer to which you should use depends entirely on what you are making and how much of it. I have shipped real video with both local and paid voices, so let me give you the grounded comparison, not the hype. Linto masa pilpis di panlitis where local text-to-speech stands today, because it has come a long way. You can now run voice models on a home GPU that produce clear, natural, perfectly listenable speech for narration, audiobooks, internal tools, accessibility, drafts. It is more than good enough. The robotic, flat, obviously synthetic voice that people remember from a few years ago is gone. Modern local models handle pacing and pronunciation well, and to a casual listener they often sound completely fine. So if your mental image of free local TTS is something that sounds cheap, update it. That is no longer the reality for the better local models. Now the honest catch, because there is one. The very best paid voice services still win on one specific thing, and it is emotion and expressiveness in the hardest cases. When a line needs real feeling, a laugh, a sigh, genuine excitement, subtle sarcasm, the top paid voices pull it off more convincingly than local models usually do. Local models are excellent at steady, clear narration. They are weaker at acting. So if your project lives or dies on a voice that performs, that conveys a lot of emotion and carries the whole thing, the paid services still have an edge. If your project just needs clear, pleasant narration of information, local closes that gap almost entirely. Let me talk about speed on a home GPU, because this is a real and pleasant surprise. Generating speech is much lighter work than generating images or running a big language model on a decent graphics card. A good local TTS model produces audio faster than real time, often several times faster. That means a 10-minute narration can be generated in a couple of minutes. That speed is what makes local TTS practical for someone producing a lot of audio. You are not waiting around. You feed it a script and the audio comes back quickly. For my video pipeline, this matters enormously, because every video needs a full voiceover, and I make a lot of them. Here is the cost picture, which is the heart of the decision. Paid voice services charge by the amount of audio you generate, usually per character or per minute of speech. For occasional use, that is cheap and totally reasonable, but it scales with volume, and if you generate a lot of audio, it adds up steadily, month after month. Local TTS has no per minute charge at all. You paid for the GPU, you pay for the electricity, and after that the audio is effectively free no matter how much you make. So there is a crossover point. Below some volume, paid is cheaper and simpler. Above it, local wins, and the more you produce, the more lopsided that becomes in local's favor. Let me make that crossover concrete with how I think about it. If you make the occasional voiceover a few minutes here and there, paying for a top-tier voice is the obvious choice. It is cheap at that volume and you get the best quality with zero setup. But if you are producing hours of narration every week like I am, that paid bill becomes a real recurring cost, and the quality difference for steady narration is small enough that local is clearly the better trade. So the question is not which is better in the abstract, it is how much audio you make and how much the voice has to carry. High volume plus steady narration points hard at local, low volume plus high emotional demand points at paid. There is a control dimension people overlook, and it cuts in local's favor. When you run TTS locally, you have the model on your machine, and you can do things the paid services do not always let you do. Generate unlimited audio without watching a quota. Integrate it tightly into your own scripts and pipelines. Keep working offline, and crucially, regenerate as many times as you want while you tune the script with no cost per attempt. That last one matters more than it sounds. When every regeneration is free, you iterate freely on your script and pacing. When every regeneration costs money, you start rationing your attempts, and that quietly makes your work worse. Let me also be honest about the setup text, because local TTS is not zero effort. You install the model and its dependencies, you make sure it uses your GPU, and you spend some time choosing a voice and tuning settings to get the sound you want. The better local options can be a little fussy to get running the first time. A paid service, by contrast, is just an API call. You send text, you get audio, no setup, no maintenance. So for someone who wants a voice today with zero fuss and only needs it occasionally, the paid path is genuinely the smart choice. Local only pays off when your volume is high enough to justify the setup time, which it usually is for people producing content seriously. Let me share where I actually landed because it is a split decision and that is the honest answer. For my channel narration, which is steady, informational, and high volume, I lean local because the quality is more than good enough for clear narration and the volume would make a paid bill real. But for the rare project where the voice has to perform, where emotion is the whole point, I will reach for a top paid voice without hesitation because that is exactly the gap local has not fully closed. It is the same pattern I use everywhere. Route the high volume steady work to local and pay for the cloud on the specific cases where the quality difference actually matters to the result. Let me get specific about what local TTS actually sounds like now, because vague praise is useless. The better local models produce speech with natural sentence rhythm, correct emphasis on most words, and smooth transitions between sentences. They handle commas and periods as real pauses, they raise the pitch slightly on questions, and they get the pacing of normal narration right. Where they still slip is on the unusual stuff. An odd proper noun might get mispronounced, a sentence with a tricky structure might land with slightly wrong emphasis, and big emotional swings come out flatter than a top-paid voice would deliver them. But for straight reading of clear text, the output is genuinely pleasant to listen to, the kind of thing a listener would never flag as synthetic unless you told them. Let me explain the pronunciation fixes, because this is the most common frustration and it has real solutions. When a local model mispronounces a specific word, usually a name, a brand, or a technical term, you are not stuck. The simplest fix is to spell the word phonetically in the script, writing it the way it sounds rather than the way it is spelled. The model then says it correctly. For words you use often, you can build up a small list of these substitutions and apply them automatically before generating. It is a little manual at first, but it is a one-time fix per word, and after a while your problem words are all handled. That small bit of script preparation is the difference between a voiceover that sounds professional and one with a jarring mispronunciation in the middle. Thirdly, and let me cover the voice selection and consistency point because it matters for any ongoing project. Local TTS models come with a set of built-in voices, and some let you provide a short sample to guide the voice. The key thing for content is consistency. If you are making a series, you want the same voice across every piece, so the listener gets a stable identity. Local gives you that control directly because the voice lives on your machine and does not change unless you change it. Paid services can change or retire voices over time, which can quietly break the consistency of a long-running project. Owning the model means the voice you picked is the voice you keep, which is a real and underrated advantage for anyone building a body of work over time. Let me talk about the integration angle, because this is where local TTS earns its place in the real pipeline. Because the model runs on your machine, you can call it from your own scripts. That means your whole production flow can be automated. A script gets written, your code hands it to the local TTS model, the audio comes back, and it flows straight into the next stage of your pipeline without you touching anything. For someone producing content at volume, that automation is the whole game. You are not sitting there generating each voiceover by hand. The system does it. Doing that against the paid service is possible too, but every run costs money and you have a quota hanging over you. Local makes the automated high-volume case both free and unlimited. Let me give you the honest setup reality so you can judge whether it is worth it for you. Getting a good local TTS model running takes more effort than a paid service, which is just an API call. You install the model and its dependencies, you make sure it uses your GPU, and you spend some time auditioning voices and tuning settings until the output sounds the way you want. The better the model, the fussier this can be the first time. Budget an afternoon to get it dialed in. After that, it just works and you rarely touch it again. So the decision is whether the ongoing free, unlimited private audio is worth that upfront afternoon. For high-volume creators, it clearly is. For someone needing the occasional clip, the paid path with zero setup is the smarter use of time. Let me name a practical hybrid that I think is underrated. You do not have to pick one tool for everything. For the bulk of your narration, the steady informational reading, run it locally for free. Then, for the rare lines that genuinely need to perform, the emotional hook, the dramatic moments, generate just those few lines with a top-paid voice and stitch them in. You pay only for the handful of lines that need the extra quality and everything else is free. That targeted approach gets you most of the paid quality where it counts, while keeping your costs near zero overall. It takes a little more orchestration, but for serious content work, it is the best of both worlds. One more thing worth naming, the ethics and the line, briefly and honestly. Voice models can clone a specific person's voice from a sample, and that capability deserves real care. Cloning your own voice for your own work is one thing. Using these tools on someone else's voice without their clear consent is a line you should not cross. Local tools do not change that ethics, they just make the capability cheaper and more private. so use the power responsibly. The fact that you can run it on your own machine with nobody watching makes the responsibility yours, not less important. Let me give you a feel for the speed numbers so the practical side is concrete. On a decent home graphics card, a good local TTS model generates speech several times faster than real time, so a 10-minute narration comes back in roughly 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes less. That means generating a full voiceover is something you do while you grab a coffee, not something you wait around for. And because it is local, you can regenerate as many times as you want at no cost while you tweak the script, which changes how you work. You stop rationing attempts and start freely iterating until the pacing and emphasis are right. That freedom to redo cheaply more than any single quality number is what makes local TTS pleasant for serious productions. Let me name the formats and the practical handoff because it matters for a pipeline. Local TTS gives you a standard audio file, the same kind any editor or player handles, so it drops straight into whatever you are building. You can generate one long file for a whole script or generate it in pieces and stitch them, which is useful when you want to regenerate just one line that came out wrong without redoing the whole thing. That granularity is a quiet advantage of running it yourself. You have full control over how the audio is chunked and assembled rather than being handed one block from a service. For anyone editing carefully, that control over the pieces is worth a lot. So to bring it together, here is how to choose. If you make a little audio and need top emotional quality, pay for a great voice. It is cheap at low volume and best in class. If you make a lot of audio that is mostly clear narration, run it locally because the quality is now genuinely good, the speed on a home GPU is fast, and the cost per minute drops to nothing. And if you do both kinds of work, do both, routing each project to the right tool. The deciding factors are simple: how much audio and how much the voice has to carry. Answer those two and the right choice is obvious. Text-to-speech is one of the clearest examples of local AI catching up to paid for the everyday case while paid still leads on the hardest case. And untangling exactly that kind of trade-off is what this channel is for. Real working systems, honest comparisons, no hype. If that is your thing, subscribe and follow along. Subscribe for more AI builds.